Okay, all right. So good evening, everyone. Welcome to the City of South Burlington Development Review Board meeting of February 2nd, 2022. My name is Dawn Philibert. I'm the chair of the DRB. And with us tonight are other board members, Mark Baer, Frank Kochman, Jim Langen, Stephanie Wyman, Dan Albrecht, and Quinn Mann. And in attendance from the City of South Burlington, Marla Keene, our development review planner, and Delilah Hall, our zoning administrator. We are using a new platform for audio video conferencing tonight. We're using Zoom. This is the first time, so bear with us if we encounter some little glitches as we go through the meeting.
There are, yep.
I understand that it's possible. Are there any people in the audience, Marla? Okay, good, thank you. Okay, thank you. So there are a number of ways for people to participate in this meeting virtually, as we are doing now, in person at the auditorium at City Hall, and also by phone. For you folks who are actually in the auditorium now, thank you for all of you, thank you for attending. But for those of you at City Hall, at the back of the room, there are two sets of doors, and in an emergency, you can evacuate the auditorium and the City Hall by going through either of those doors and turning left or right to get outside. Couple of guidelines for virtual attendance, and we don't know how many more meetings we're going to be doing virtually. We had the pleasure of being in the brand new auditorium for a couple of meetings, and here we are back again. And I don't think we know what the near future is going to bring, but please keep your microphones muted and your cameras off unless you've been recognized to present. We will leave the cameras of the board members on for people to see. And during the public comment, if you wish to participate, either raise your hand if we see you, turn your video on and raise your hand, or you may make a comment in the comment section or the chat function to be recognized. And please try to avoid crosstalk in the chat function. First of all, it's not part of the public record, and second of all, it can be very distracting for all of us. So thank you for that. So let's turn to tonight's agenda. The first agenda item, let's see, emergency evacuation procedures, which I already did. And then number two, additions, deletions, or changes in the order of the agenda items. And we do have one change tonight, or one addition, I should say. And that is Marla, I'm sorry, I don't have the name of the number of the project.
So that's
that we're going to open up
Johnson
again.
Way.
Do you have that? Okay. We are going to open that hearing up again because some issues have come up that we need to resolve. So I would entertain a motion to open that project.
Dawn, I'll make a motion that we reopen whatever that project number you just said.
Okay,
I didn't write
thanks,
it down,
Mark. Do I have a second?
For reconsideration.
Great, thanks. A second?
I'll second.
Okay, thank you. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? No. Okay, thank you. So we will open that up and review it at a future date. Announcements. Are there any announcements? Let's see. I think we already said that the meeting is being recorded. Thank you for attending. We talked about signing. For those of you who are in the auditorium, please make sure you sign the sign-in sheet in case you want to have party status at a later point in time. Those of you on the phone or virtually, you can indicate your participation by either noting it in the chat room with your contact information or by emailing Marla at mkeene@sburl.com. Are there any comments or questions from the public that are not related to the agenda? Okay, hearing none, I think we will move on to our first item. The first one, number 5 on the agenda, is the continued final plat application SD 2126 of Greenfield Capital LLC to consolidate 3 lots of 6.77 acres, lot 11, 6.62 acres, lot 12, and 6.42 acres, lot 13, into one lot for the purpose of constructing a 130,790 square foot on a single 19.81 acre lot. The application for development is being reviewed under separate site plan application, and this is at 443 Community Drive. So what we have before us tonight is a draft written decision that Marla has presented to us. And it is before you now. And I do not actually see any red comments from Marla. So I think, Marla, correct me if I'm
yeah,
wrong,
so the
we're just,
applicant is here,
we are
and
just
I would give them a
voting
chance
to
if they wanted
close
to have
this?
any comments on what was in the draft decision, and then if the board had any things that they wanted to talk about, and then you can
Okay.
entertain public comment and then close.
Okay, good. All right.
Hi,
So,
Don, this is Jim Lang, and
Hi, Jim.
I'm
You're
gonna
recused.
recuse myself from this, so I'll
Okay,
step
thank you,
away.
Jim. And Stephanie, you're recused too, aren't you?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, thank you. So who is here for the
Yes.
applicant? Because I saw John Illick, I think, earlier.
We have some folks here in person. Dawn.
John, are you here?
We have several members of the
Okay,
REARC
who's
team.
here for the applicant?
Chris Huston, Johnny Illick, and Michael Biama.
Okay. Okay.
Not if
Thank
they've been
you.
sworn in on previous
And,
nights.
Marla, do I need to swear them in again?
Correct. There are other members of the team here
And
as
I
well.
believe you all have, haven't you?
If you're not going to be providing testimony, we
Okay.
don't need to swear you in.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, good. So is that your name, Chris? Are you, so Chris, this is an
Oh, we have no
opportunity for you to
comments. Thank
respond
you.
to anything in the draft decision that you might want the board to hear.
Yes, I think so.
Simple as that? All right, thanks. Board, any
Frank,
comments
you had
that
had a
people would like
comment
to
that you
make?
had sent me by email. This will be a good
Questions or
time.
comments? No.
I did because, and I tried to call you because I didn't quite understand what you were proposing to do. You had a requirement of an easement deed to an indeterminate entity, and I thought that was legally questionable. And apparently you've done it before with the blessing, presumably with the blessing of council, I'm not sure. But I'll illustrate what I mean. Before the statute was changed to, ipso facto, according to the legislature, make an estate, a death estate, a quote entity, you could not convey property to or from the estate of so-and-so. You had to convey it to or from the named executor or administrator as executor administrator, because that was a tangible, actual person. That's the principle behind the question I had, or the concern I had about the way the condition was framed for the easement deed. What I read was a deed that went to the undefined owner of lot 9B. to me, that violated the legal principle. I'm particularly anxious to have, if we're going to pursue this at all, to have Jim weigh in on that. Or if
Yeah, I did
Marla has
pursue it further.
pursued it further since
So I
spoke.
looked at the deed that they had sent, which I will look at again now. So I have it right in front of me. Jim's recused.
Jim's
yeah.
gone. Oh, Jim's he's
So
recused, right?
He is
so
recused.
lot 9B.
Anyway, that's the comment.
Yep.
Can you still hear it?
Can you not hear us?
I'm sorry, Frank, what did you say?
Okay. Okay.
Cut out.
So this
No, I can hear you fine.
easement
I just
deed
got
is
this
from
message. Okay.
Greenfield Capital LLC, which Frank correctly states does not yet own the lot, to the Community Drive Burlington LLC, this easement. So I think the defect here, Frank, if I were to restate it, is that Greenfield Capital does not yet own the land that underlies the easement, and therefore they cannot convey it to Community Drive Burlington LLC.
Wait a minute, has it been revised? Because the one I saw just said to the owner of lot 9B. That was my concern. In other words, I don't have any problem if you said a condition of this permit is that upon, prior to doing any work, or you shall convey an easement substantially to Community Drive LLC in the form attached, or the form of this easement deed, but that's not what I read. What I read was something that ran to, quote, the owner of lot 9B on the face of the deed, and that's what I was raising as a problem.
Delilah's going to pull it up on the screen. It's 2126. Yep. And if you sort by most recent, it's the most recent. It's the newest thing in the folder. There you go. First thing. This is very strange because Delilah and I had to switch computers as well as being a new meeting.
I'm just opening a read on my copy.
Perfect. Yeah, because I'm in it. And then she's just going to share screen. I think right where you are, right the first page.
Oh, I don't have the Greenfield Capital does freely give, grant, sell, convey, and confirm unto the lot
Right.
9B owner. Okay, all right, so Community Drive does exist, all right? All right.
Okay, so-
No, I withdraw the concern. I'm sorry, I misread it. I thought you were conveying to an indeterminate person.
Yes.
But Community Drive Burlington LLC is a
Okay, and then we'll
is
change
an
the
existing
condition to
entity,
say
right?
instead of prior to recording the Mylar, because Greenfield Capital won't own it at the time of recording the Mylar, to before getting the zoning permit, because at that time they will own it.
Okay,
Any other
yeah,
board
sorry,
comments?
that's fine.
Dawn, I think you're muted.
Indeed, I was. Thanks. Thank you, Frank and Marla. Are there any members of the public who would like to provide testimony about this project?
There are not, no.
Any present in the auditorium? And Delilah, are there any online who have indicated an interest? No, okay, thanks. Okay, hearing none, I would entertain a motion to close this hearing.
I'll make a motion that we close final plat application SD 2126 of Greenfield Capital LLC.
Great, thank you. Second, thanks, Dan. Any discussion? All in favor of closing this hearing, say aye.
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 Any opposed? No, it is closed. Thank you, applicant. We're moving right on to your other project. The next agenda item is item number 6, continued site plan application SP 21046 of Greenfield Capital LLC to construct a 2 to 3 story, 130,790 square foot light manufacturing warehouse and office project, 418 parking spaces and associated site improvements on a proposed 19.81 acre lot at 443 Community Drive. We have a staff report. I've got to get mine up here.
So this is a draft
And there are a couple of
decision
staff comments.
as well. There was one, I think, red item in there.
Right. I don't seem to have mine. Okay, I don't seem to have
Sure,
mine
that's
on
on
my
page
iPad. So
7.
if we could turn to the red areas, please. That's right, page 7 and page 8. Thank you.
So this was about the plant soil preparation specification. They actually did provide that, and the city arborist did review it and said it looks good. So my proposed modification here would be to, I guess it's up to the board, but we would have to change this to say that it's fine. And then the board will have to decide whether to include the comments of the city arborist anyway. So we can do that quickly, deliberatively later if we'd like.
Okay. Okay, fine.
I think that was
Everyone okay with
it.
that?
Yep.
Okay, and the next comment. On page 8, there's a comment, I believe. This is about screening of the transformer with yew shrubs on 3 sides. So the open side shall be turned to face the building so that the cabinets have at least possible visibility from the public way. Is everybody on the board okay with that? Anybody have any problems with it?
Is there a problem in closing the electrical transformer with some sort of gate rather than having it open?
Well, this will have trees on 3 sides.
Right. And I'm saying on the open side, instead of having it open, would it be possible to have,
They
you know,
certainly could. I think this is, correct me if I'm
fence
wrong,
and a
Michael,
gate of
but I
some
think
sort.
this is like
Oh,
a
to still-
typical transformer, like the light green, fully enclosed box, right?
Correct.
well, yeah, all right, they're all over the place. They're routinely
Yeah.
exposed. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I withdraw the comment.
Okay, thanks, Frank. I think that's it. So,
Just such a fucking dick.
pardon? I think that's it for the comments there. Are there any other board questions or comments? Are there any members of the public that would like to provide testimony? No. Any indicated online? Delilah, no, okay. So I would entertain a motion to close this hearing.
I'll make a motion to close site plan application SB 21046 of Greenfield Capital LLC, 435 Community Drive.
Thank you, Mark. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Thanks, Dan. Any discussion before we take a vote? Okay, all in favor of closing SP 21046, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Nope. Okay,
Thank-
the hearing is
Yes,
closed.
thank you all so much for the time. We
Rearc
really
team.
appreciate it.
Good
We're
luck.
super excited about seeing this project here in South Burlington. Yes, thank you very much.
Good, we'll look forward to seeing it,
Thanks for coming in.
seeing it
Go
emerge
out
and
for drinks
evolve.
or something.
Thank you.
Go to Windjammer.
Okay. Okay, next item on the agenda, item number 7, which is preliminary and final plat application SD 2141 of the Snyder Group Incorporated to amend a previously approved plan for planned unit development on 25.93 acres consisting of 18 single-family dwellings, 10 two-family dwellings, 3 three-unit multifamily dwellings, and an existing single-family home. The amendment consists of eliminating an approved left lane, turn lane on Spear Street, modifying approved landscaping along Spear Street, and minor modifications to water, sewer, and drainage pipes. 1302, 1340, and 1350 Spear Street. Stephanie and Jim, I believe you're back with us.
I'm back. Yes, Don.
Okay, good. Thanks. Welcome back. So let me find mine here. Okay. All right. Are there any recusals or things people would like to disclose? Okay, hearing none. Let's move on to
Do
the
you
staff
wanna-
comments.
Did we already swear in and stuff?
Comment number 1. I'm sorry. Who is here for the applicant, please? I'm sorry.
Andy Rowe with Lamoureux and Dickinson, and Gary Farrell, landowner and applicant, is also online with us tonight as well.
Okay, thank you, Andy. Would you both please raise your right hand? Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth under penalty of perjury?
I do.
Thank you. Gary, did I hear you say yes?
I do.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. Thank you, Gary.
Okay.
All right. Would you please give us a very brief overview of what is before us tonight? Andy.
So this project was originally approved by the board in 2017. The staff report gets into a little bit of the history on the delay, but construction is now underway on this project. It was in late in the fall. This application primarily involves a number of technical modifications to the plan, sort of housekeeping items that evolved as we reviewed the plans for construction with the Public Works Department and Water Department, and the elimination of the southbound turn lane on Spear Street. I would note that in 2017, when this application was under original review, that the turn lane wasn't warranted at that time, but it was requested by the Director of Public Works. When it was revisited, actually, the issue was raised by the Director of Public Works earlier in 2021. We redid the analysis, again, came up with the same conclusion that it was not warranted. And the Public Works Director at this time agreed, and we're now moving forward with the application seeking removal of that turn lane requirement.
Okay, thank you very much. So let's turn to the staff report comments on page 5. There, the first comment is approval of the southbound left turn. Board accept. So the question is, does the board accept the recommendations and conclusions of the Director of Public Works that this can be eliminated?
Yes.
This is Jim. I have a number of questions and concerns, and I can wait for other folks to weigh in, but I have a few questions.
Okay.
So do I, but I'll defer, I'll wait to hear what Jim has to say before I voice.
Is there anyone else other than Jim and Frank who would like to weigh in on this?
No, Don, in regards to specifically the southbound left turn lane, I'm not in conflict with the Director of Public Works' recommendation to accept that change.
Okay, thanks, Mark.
But I would like to obviously hear what the other board members have to say.
Sure, of course. So Jim, go ahead. Tell us what your thoughts and concerns are.
Sure. Yeah. I just, I mean, I drive on this segment daily, and I'm a little. It's the proposed intersection here is really where the left-hand turn would be is really close to Swift and Spear, and just with the traffic volumes that are going in both directions, especially in the PM hours, it's going to be hard for someone to turn left into this new development. And I think it's pretty likely that the cars would be backed up into the intersection of Swift and Spear, waiting for someone to be able to turn left into this development. And I think that's going to create some additional problems in an already problematic intersection at Swift and Spear. So it's a pretty steady stream of traffic heading in both directions, around 5 o'clock. And I see it as an issue. And then, so that's my sort of general concern. And then just looking through the traffic study, I have a number of sort of questions on page 20 of our packet. It's using an assumption for traffic levels. It's using 2013 numbers, throwing some, not statistics, but just sort of statements that, traffic volumes in Vermont's urban areas have declined since 2008, which may be true if you factor in sort of, urban areas around the state, like, Rutland or Barry or St. Albans City that are declining in population. But since 2008, South Burlington is a lot larger, and so is Shelburne. And so is the sort of the campus that is at the top of Spear Street that a lot of these cars are going to, both the medical center and the university. And so I don't think I think I'd be surprised if the 2013 numbers on Spear Street, as opposed to Vermont's urban areas, have actually declined since 2008. So I question some of the sort of assumptions there. And also the crash, so the crash data, this is a high crash segment, and it's sort of explained away that, the crashes are occurring at the intersection of Swift and Spear for the most part, but that's sort of exactly my point. You're going to be impacting this segment. So on page 23, it feels like the traffic assessment is explaining away the fact that this is already a high crash zone. So that's a concern to me. And I also just want to point out that although the speed limit is 35 miles an hour, I think people who drive this regularly would agree that that is not the speed that cars are going on this road. And so I think most cars are going well above that speed. And so I think having this without a left turn lane here, I think the chances of rear end crashes seems to me to be high. So I'm not a traffic engineer. I'm a local resident. I have been on the board of local motion, so I've studied some of this stuff, but I'm not a student of it. But those are my concerns.
Thank you, Jim. Very articulate, as always. Frank, do you want to follow up with this, with your thoughts and comments?
Yeah, broadly, I did not put in the work that Jim did on the particulars. I just have the same concern. as a regular user of the road segment, and particularly with the knowledge that traffic is only going to continue to grow on Spear Street. There's no possibility that there's going to be anything over in the coming years except in Spear Street. I'm opposed to the change. Let's keep it simple. I think Jim articulated all the specifics, but as a user, my empirical sense is that the left-hand turn lane belongs if it's already in there, and we are not required to grant the amendment, which I don't think we are. If anybody wants to make the argument otherwise, they can. I would oppose the amendment in that respect.
Okay.
For basically Jim's reasons.
Don, I just wanted to make one point that I forgot to make,
Sure.
was that also there was a 2004, scoping study for the Spear Street corridor, and there've been a number of changes since then. But one of the, sort of facts in that study that's on the, the DPW, or not the DP, the city's, webpage, is that the intersection at Nolan Farm, Deerfield, and Spear is already at a level F. In 2004 was at that level. It is much worse now. And this, development, the traffic study says about 20% of the traffic from this development is going to be diverted to Nolan Farm, which I think will contribute to it. So I think we've got some issues. I mean, it's not specific to this turn lane, but there are real issues on this stretch of the road that I think this turn lane was at least originally trying to address.
Thank you, Jim. Other members of the board, what are your thoughts?
Don, Mark here.
Yeah.
No, I would just say that, with Jim's explanation, and the fact that it was originally approved, and I see where he's coming from, and I don't see a great reason to reduce the ability to provide turn lanes on an already heavily trafficked road. Unless for some reason putting this turn lane, adds to like a traffic issue, or something like makes it more dangerous. I agree. I think we should leave it as is.
So Marla, thank you, Mark. Do you have any insight into why Justin thought it was
yes.
appropriate to remove the turning lane?
Would you like to hear from me, or would you like to hear from Andy in response to some of these concerns?
Okay. Well, Andy's the applicant. I'm really interested in and
Yeah,
I'm happy
so
to hear from Andy, but I'd like to hear Justin's perspective
review was
first,
very
please.
brief. He said, "I'm good with the analysis as presented and agree with their proposed removal of the turn lane." However, Justin reviewed the study in pretty great detail and sent some minor corrections to the study back to the applicant in his initial read through. There were some numbers transposed, and he asked them to provide justification for the 35 miles an hour. Ultimately, my understanding is that, well, two factors. One, the city is sort of in the business of getting away from widening our highways. More pavement means more speed, means more maintenance costs, and it's just sort of philosophically the direction the city wants to head, which is to like increase multimodal connectivity rather than increasing the speed and facility of our vehicular network. So that's part one. And then part two is there is a short-term to medium-term plan to restripe Spear Street so that it's presently two 12-foot lanes, and then on the east side it's a 2 1.5-foot shoulder and the remainder on the west side, so it's a between 4 and 6 foot shoulder on the west side. I'm sure you've seen it. People bike on the west side going southbound, and then when they loop back on Dorset Street going northbound, just because that's the way the shoulders are safest. The long-term plan is to or the medium-term plan is to restripe Spear Street to be 2 10-foot lanes and 2 5-foot bike lanes. And so in that scenario, you know, it would be a slower speed road, and there would be sort of more consistent treatment and there would be more room for bikes and pedestrians along the side. So I think that he was thinking of that sort of medium-term plan in having this be compatible with that.
But
Well, so
doesn't
that's
that
why I wanted to hear from
exacerbate
Andy, because the
the,
traffic
won't that
study concludes,
exacerbate the
based on
traffic?
scientific traffic analysis, that this is not warranted warranted is a scientific term in this case, from a traffic analysis perspective. So while everyone perceives traffic in their own way, there are specific metrics, and those specific metrics concluded that this turn lane is not necessary in this location.
Okay, thank you. So Andy, talk to us about this, please.
Sure. So again, just as a reminder, I think, you know, one of the things that Marla relayed from Justin was the city's thought process has evolved on this. Because again, and I mentioned this earlier, the turn lane wasn't warranted in 2016, 2017 when the traffic study, the larger traffic study and the turn lane analysis was originally performed. And just to note, I'm not the author. Roger Dickinson, our traffic engineer, is the one that authored this analysis and the original report. And just responding to a couple of items that Jim had raised, the entrance to this project, the Elm Street, Spear Street intersection, Elm Street being the proposed street into Spear Meadows, is about 1,200 feet south of the intersection of Swift and Spear. And I was pretty conservative in measuring that. You know, that's probably from the south approach on Spear Street, from about the stop bar. So I'm not measuring to the north side or to the center of the intersection. So I think there's ample room for cars to queue up during the peak hour. If there's somebody stopped wanting to make a left turn in and it does result in a queue behind them, there's 1,200 feet there, which is a fair amount of room, a lot of room for vehicles to queue behind them. The point that Marla relayed from Justin as well is if you've got the turn lane, it allows for a freer flow of traffic, which can also result in higher speeds. You know, the volume of traffic can also tend to slow things down as well. I did want to point out that the count data that the traffic study was based upon and the updated turn lane warrant analysis was based upon was a continuous count recorder that's located on Spear Street, just to the west, I believe, of Swift. On Swift Street, just to the west of Spear. So while it was not capturing the data on Spear Street itself, it certainly is in the vicinity of the project, and it's not, you know, another municipality or another part of Chittenden County, a less urban area.
So what year is that from?
That was a 2020 continuous count.
Like during the pandemic lockdown, or when was that?
Yes, but I think it's also important to note that the V-Trans growth factors look at a longer period, and that's where the 2.5% increase comes in. You know, certainly traffic volumes have decreased during the COVID period. They also decreased and have only, and again, I'm talking sort of in general terms, but yeah. You know, from 2008, the downturn in 2008, they're only getting back now to about 2008 levels. And around that time period, or since that time period, V-Trans has been looking at those growth factors, and they've been much more modest growth factors than some of the growth factors that have been applied prior to 2008. So I'm not disputing the traffic volume that exists, especially for somebody that commutes regularly on Spear Street. But rather pointing out that, you know, overall traffic volumes aren't increasing at the same rate that they have in the past? Is it due to commuting patterns, working from home, multimodal? Probably a combination of all of those factors.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it was 2020 was a different. I mean, Spear Street was pleasant for a while actually. So these numbers were recorded in 2020. I mean that when, yeah, that's. I mean, I would think that that's going to be the low point from the last 10 years. So that's interesting.
Yes, but we weren't looking just at the 2020 data, not just a snapshot, but that was the most recent data looking up to and including 2020.
Okay, thank you, Andy. Any other board members want to weigh in on this?
If I can just offer one more thing, I mean, if
Sure.
the board is looking for additional information, or is leaning toward requiring keeping the left turn lane, or is interested in continuing this conversation with Roger Dickinson when he prepared the traffic impact assessment originally and both of the left turn lane analyses, he can certainly be available. He's not available tonight, but if you want to continue the hearing, he could be available at the next opportunity. Again, if you want to get into a greater, more detailed discussion on the analyses.
What do you think? Thank you, Andy. What do you think, board members, about
I
continuing?
have a question just for clarity.
Sure, Dan.
So it's a southbound lane, or it's a lane within Spear Street to enable people to turn left into the development, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Second question is, when this was approved before, I see the thing about the trip ends. Was it required because of the trip ends, or was it just sort of like the board thought it would be a good idea?
I don't want to speak for the board. I'm not sure how many members were on the board at the time this project was originally reviewed, but we had provided a traffic impact assessment that included the turn lane analysis to Justin, who was Public Works Director at that time. And it was Justin's request that the turn lane be provided. It was not because the turn lane was warranted. And again, my recollection was it wasn't something that was requested by the board. That request originated with the Public Works Director at the time.
Dawn,
Yes.
I can speak to
I think Frank was
that
too.
loosely, only because I probably am the only member of the board
Yeah,
that
for
it's
2017,
was
Frank was there.
on for the initial. Frank was as
The
well.
original, no.
Oh, 2017. Okay, I'm thinking back to like the full.
The
Yeah,
dogs.
Yeah.
What?
But I think in regards to turn lanes, typically, and I think this more goes to the board's general consensus, is that, we get recommendations that staff and the applicant and Public Works have worked out. And, in general, we rarely sort of make recommendations for a requirement. It's something that's brought to us as a board and we agree or disagree. And we generally, and this is historically, agree with Public Works' recommendation, for how it should go. So, I hear Jim's argument. I'm in agreement with it, but I also hear, the technical side of it, which is really what the reality versus perception. So, I am leaning towards liking to hear from Roger Dickinson. But, we're just going to get more numbers. And I think this might be sort of like a longer term issue, especially given the information regarding, the future planning of going down to 10-foot lanes, which will also slow down traffic because 12-foot lanes just feels like a raceway. And getting better bike lanes on both sides than just on one side. So, I think this is something where we need to get some more testimony, and I'm not prepared to make a decision tonight. I could kind of go both ways because I typically err on the side of providing better safety features, but, I don't want to require it if we're going to be changing it long term.
Can I make a request of the applicant? And this just for, and I was trying to look it up on my employer's website. I should be doing a better job at this. But can we get a simple, I started going to the AADT traffic volume data that's linked on our website, but it's a little clunkier system to look up. I mean, I think if we just had sort of like southbound, south end, northbound, Spear Street, traffic count data, just raw data, just so people can think about this, you know, because yeah, that would just sort of help. And obviously 2020 is I don't even know how often it's been assessed, but I'm sure it's got relatively robust data and it'll tell us something and what's real and what's not.
So Marla, what are your thoughts about that? Is that possible to get that data?
I'm asking the applicant to do it.
Oh, all right, thank you.
Yeah, we'd be happy to provide count data, both
I think that the
daily and AM and PM peak hour for
traffic
Spear Street.
report, page
Okay, good.
13, kind
Problem?
of shows what
Good.
that PM peak hour traffic is. Does it not? I'm not super great at reading these traffic studies.
It has the design hour volume for the PM peak hour. Or you can determine that from the from figure 3.
But of course, that reflects current conditions, right? The time.
Right, that's the 2022 estimated. But we can certainly provide you.
That's estimated, that's not the actual count?
No, figure 3 presents the estimated
Which includes the
2022
project, right? That's what makes it estimated.
design hour volume for the PM peak hour. Correct, but it's also increased from the count data that we had obtained to get to the year 2022, and then it was also projected out to 2027.
I don't want to get into
Full
technical
build.
argument. I'm sorry, Andy. You were in the middle of saying something?
Frank,
Sorry, was also-
you're breaking up a lot, Frank. It's kind of hard to hear you sometime.
Is this any better?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Let me leave. I'm some distance away from, because it's set up for the TV. But
Yeah,
Can you hear
okay.
me now? Okay, all right. Yeah, I didn't want to interrupt Andy. I started to say something, but it cut him off in mid-sentence. Andy, you want to finish your thought?
Yeah, so the volumes were also projected to 2027 to reflect the full build out of the project.
Okay, now I'll say what I wanted to say. A couple of,
Oops, you cut out, Frank.
so first, it's crystal on the case law, that of course, there's nothing about the traffic studies that bind us. They're simply an aid if we want to use them as a matter of law. Secondly, I don't want to get in a technical argument with Roger because it's entirely possible I'll hire him next month to do exactly what he's doing. But thirdly, I've had enough experience with the traffic studies over the years to know that projections for years out are, like budget office budget projections from the federal government that, and finally, on this particular project, my feelings are pretty strong. I don't need to hear more from Roger. I don't need to hear further, quote, technical analysis, because I don't think technical analysis really answers the question, which is what's going to happen.
Frank, we can't hear
Go
you.
with my judgment.
You're breaking up.
Can you hear me now? How's it? Is it still?
No, you're buzzing out.
I'm sorry. How about now?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
All right, let me actually get on top of the thing. All right. What I was going to say is, bottom line, going over the technical, we are authorized to do by the court. Because in this particular case, it's, my on the ground, I just trust my on the ground feel more than I trust any technical analysis. And there's only going to be growth on Spear Street. The study periods are from a particular down period. The adjustments are what they are, but I still don't buy them for the long term. We have a given situation. The applicant's only motive can be presumably economic. There's no functional feature of his development that's going to get better because he doesn't have a turn lane. So I'm not knocking an economic motive, but after all, it's part of why the developer's doing what the developer's doing. That's perfectly respectable, but we don't have to yield to it. We have something that in the long term, I think is going to be better for Spear Street than not having it. That's my rationale. I think it's Jim's, but he can speak for himself. I don't think additional data from the same source is going to change that.
Okay, so thank you, Frank. Where do we go with this? Mark, do you still feel like you'd like to see some more data?
I could go either way. I hear what Frank's saying, I'm just not sure how I feel about this. It's not an easy cut and dry kind of decision.
Can I weigh in here?
Sure, Stephanie, please.
So, I think that I understand where like Jim's coming from and wanting to have the turn lane and the comfortability of the motorist, right? So if you're driving down Spear Street, you're trying to get home, it's peak hour traffic. The person behind you is in a hurry too. They don't want to wait for people, for traffic to clear out, for you to make that left-hand turn. So they're going to go around you if there's no turn lane there. But I think we don't always need to be putting in these turn lanes if they're not warranted by the traffic count. And I do err on the side of what is in the data, because that's the metric that we have to go by as engineers to do designs to make these decisions. And kind of to what Marlo was saying is you look at the future and what's the way that we're going with city planning and what is, there's a bigger push on multimodal use and to narrow down our travel lanes and make things more bike and pedestrian friendly. So by expanding your pavement, by expanding the presence, for lack of a better word, for the motorists and having an easier commute time for them, you're kind of negating the thoughts of, okay, but what's the overall experience for everyone? And I agree to some degree, it's a little bit, it can be perceived as more dangerous if someone's trying to cut around someone who's trying to make a left-hand turn. They're not looking in their side mirror and they clip a bicycle, a cyclist who's going down the road or a pedestrian that's walking in the shoulder or something. So there is that account, to take into account there. But I still hesitate to say, okay, we should put this in because it feels right if the numbers aren't warranting it. And, that can come up the same thing with the signalized intersection. People are going to be like, well, I want to have a signalized intersection, or I want to have, PED push buttons at every crossing because it feels more comfortable to the user, but it's not necessarily warranted. And so I think, I prefer to look at the numbers and to read the report and say, okay, these are our design metrics. So is it actually warranted by the study?
And
I'm sorry.
Frank, I was just gonna, Stephanie, I
Wait,
appreciate.
Frank, go ahead, and then Jim, you can go.
Yeah, I would respond to that this way. The one piece of data I'd be interested in, based on my experience, is the 10-year track record collectively for all the traffic engineers, comparing their projections with the demonstrated reality, looking at what their projections were 10 years ago. The numbers, are not magic. I believe the number, I believe the count. When you put the counter out there and you say there's so much traffic today and thus and such a year and thus and such a month, that's fine. It's the accuracy of the projections that I'm taking issue with. And until it's demonstrated to me that those are reliable by a study or a meta study showing that they are over a period of time, a grain of salt.
Jim? Thank you, Frank.
But I just want to say I appreciate what Stephanie was saying, and as a former board member of Local Motion, very understand the concept of not wanting to expand pavement and be aware for all users, but I do think it's a real concern of people cutting around what will be through the bike path, and just the rear end crashes in what is already. I've read the report, and the report says this is a high crash area already without the development there, and so that's a reason to have a left-hand turn lane. Even without the development there, without the added numbers, and so that's a concern. And then just reading the report, as far as the number assumptions, it feels like it's low. I mean, 2020 was a ghost town on Spear Street. It's just not reflective of what a typical year is. And if we're going back to 2013, there are just so many more developments in South Burlington and Shelburne that are now using Spear Street from that time. So it's really just a different animal.
Thanks, Jim. Dan, you have your hand up?
Yeah, I just want to, Marla, we question this whole thing about Justin wanted it a couple of years ago, and then before he left, he said, it's okay if it isn't done. Did anything materially change in the data presented to him?
I didn't read the 2016 traffic impact study.
I do think that what sort of changed. I think that there was a more explicit position
I'm just trying to
from the
figure
city,
out why Justin changed
Dan,
his mind.
that traffic calming was the direction that the city wanted to go in when approaching road design and the multimodal and designing for all users of the road, not just vehicular throughput. And that was an adopted position of all departments of the city. So he started approaching his reviews with that frame of mind. And along with all of the other reasons that Marla voiced. And so while there may be developments in communities further south of South Burlington, the vision for Spear Street is not to be a highway that's an alternative to Route 7. It's to be a local street for South Burlingtonians that others may use every once in a while. So to design it to for throughput for multiple communities is not the goal.
It may not be the goal,
And
but it's the
design
reality.
will
and
channel
it's going to just
appropriate
become more so
traffic
in
to the
future.
appropriate roads if you
that's
design
part-
it correctly.
So
I
yeah,
don't
I
know.
mean, there are designs. I think we unanimously, supported eliminating the left-hand lane for Jefferson and for eliminating the right-hand lane at Allen. So I don't think there's I'm not predisposed to say we need more lanes. I just think there's a reason for this one.
Marla, I've got a quick question for you. Do you know that in the restriping, are they proposing to put any of
I
like
don't
the
believe they are in
candlestick,
this
like
case, no.
vertical barrier between the bike lane and the travel lane at all?
Andy, I saw you raise your hand.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out, Jim noted that there was a high crash location here. The high crash location was addressed in the April 2016 traffic impact assessment. The intersection is the high crash location. Again, the intersection of Elm Street and Spear Street, Elm Street being the proposed street into the neighborhood, is about 1,200 feet south. So the traffic study in 2016 addressed that, given that the project intersection is 1,200 feet south of where 14 of the 19 crashes that were reported occurred. And if, again, jumping back to the 2021 turn lane analysis, it's not like this turn lane warrant is close to being met. If you look at page 2, it talks about increasing the advancing volume on Spear Street. If that would have to increase by over 40% to get to the point where the left turn lane would need to be warranted. Again, somebody asked about the data changing between 2016 and 2021. I don't think the data has changed. The conclusions of the turn lane warrant analysis were the same in 2016 as they are now. I think, as Marla and Delilah commented on, the philosophy has changed. So again, this is a philosophical question for the city, but as far as the data, nothing's changed as far as the data or the conclusions between 2016 and now, and it's not like this analysis is close, or the warrant is close to being met. It's not.
Okay, thank you, Andy.
That's Gary Farrell.
Yes, and somebody had, a gentleman, you have your hand up and, oh, okay, Gary, go ahead.
Yeah, if I could just make a couple of comments. One, we're, in the process of that we've been through all these years, of course, we're asked to provide a traffic study at significant cost. And so I would hope that the numbers that are provided that use actual traffic counts are given some consideration. The other thing that a couple of comments that I heard Justin had made was, and certainly you can ask him, and it's what Stephanie brought up, which is, I think, a very important point versus worth reiterating. And that is, people, when you create a left-hand turn lane, people are just going to tend to go around. You're going to give them more space so that people are going to go around them. And the interfacing with the bike path, which is fairly narrow on Spear Street to start with, it was a real concern. And I guess I would differ. I've lived at that very location on Spear Street for 44 years, and I can't recall that the traffic during 2020 was much different than it is now or before. Most of that traffic is generated by the medical center and the University of Vermont. And the only time when you might say it might have been reduced is when classrooms were virtual and kids weren't actually on. But still, those teachers were, I assume, were going to school and doing their virtual teaching from the campus. And that's where most of the traffic is. And we've lived with it a long time. And I agree with what Andy said. If there's any problem, it's more right at Swift Street, because those streets are not aligned for starters. It's kind of a disjointed intersection, and which causes problems in itself. But I think the comments that Stephanie made, I respect other comments, and I understand there's, from what Jim had said, the board member, Jim Langan, that there is a lot of traffic on Spear Street. I guess nobody would suggest there isn't, but safety-wise, the city, from what I heard, the city opinion is, coming from Justin, is that left-hand turn lanes cause more problems than they solve. and they're leaning away from putting them in. So, thank you.
Thank you, Gary.
Dawn?
Yes, Frank.
Respectfully, I would say that the point, but Stephanie can clarify, but the point that Stephanie was making about going around people was really the opposite of what Gary thought he heard. That is, without the left-hand turn lane, people will go around to the right. They'll make incursions into the bike lane, thus increasing hazard. If they have a left turn lane, they go in the left turn lane. You don't have that problem. Stephanie, if I misunderstood you, I apologize. But I think that's what you meant, even though your overall thrust was to support the request.
Right, yes, so you're correct that if there is no left turn lane, the motorists are still going to do the exact same thing. They will go around the person that's trying to make that left, whether or not they're in the left turn lane or not. I think it all depends on what the overall pavement width and does that support the
Right, so in the original
bike
proposal, they
lane
had proposed
plus
a
a
wide
through lane
lane.
and a left turn lane.
Just to clarify the point that I made, and it's not quite correct, Frank, I don't think. The left-hand turn lane gives them, is what encourages people to go around them. There's space, but the concern is that they're going to encroach upon the bike path. If there is no left-hand turn lane, then there's no room for them to go around. There's not adequate space for them to go around the car. And that's where the conflict is. If I'm not, hopefully I'm remembering it correctly, but
I think that's not.
So you don't want to encourage cars. So with a left-hand turn lane, which is not a full lane, but it encourages people to go around those cars, and you don't want to encourage them to be encroaching on the bike path, because there's quite a lot of traffic on that west side of the street, from walkers and bike riders.
We'll have to agree to disagree on that one, particularly on this petite piece of highway where you have a fairly wide bike path on the west side. You're going south. You're going to use that to go around the car if traffic is backed up.
Well, and I think too, if I can chime in here, I think to some degree, having a left-hand turn lane prevents people from slowing down, right? So, you'll see someone go into the left-hand turn lane, but the person who's trying to go through now has the opportunity to go through at a higher speed than they maybe would have if there was only one lane, someone's trying to turn left, then the person behind them would then have to slow down. I think that a more aggressive driver or someone who's more impatient is still going to go around to the person if they have the space or not. It's just going to slow them down, hopefully.
Thank you, Stephanie. Dan, is your hand up, or have you just not removed it?
No, my hand was re-raised, so
Okay, go ahead, Dan.
I'm a Zoom pro.
Yeah, I can tell.
Unfortunately, pathetic life we all lead. I have a question for Marla. Marla, are we allowed to close the hearing tonight with the acceptance of written
No, if you're going
information
to take more
submitted up to
information,
a
you have
date
to keep the
certain?
meeting open.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So I guess I have a question for the board. It seems to me there are a couple of options. We can move on to the rest of the staff comments and deal with this in deliberations, and that's where your vote has power. Or we can ask for more information. So give me some guidance, please, board, about how you'd like to proceed.
And I personally think we can handle it in deliberations.
Okay.
I think at this point it comes down to a matter of reviewing the data we have.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure if more data is going to change minds one way or another. I think it's just a discussion.
Okay. Does anyone disagree with that?
I don't disagree, but I have a question for Marla. I would really love to see a simple table that shows Spear Street, northbound and southbound,
Got it.
annual
Yeah, so if
counts
it's
as
publicly
may be
available.
available from a traffic counter. That's all I'm trying to do. Can we close the
Yeah, yeah.
hearing and I look it up
Yes.
right, so can I look that up myself? And when we have deliberations, bring that. And that's
Good.
not considered
Okay.
new information.
Okay,
If that's the case, we'll try to gather that data ourselves sometime before we meet so we can find out what the reality is versus everybody doing their
Okay.
best based upon memory.
okay, good. Can we move on? Thank everyone for your patience. So number 2 is about I need my glasses here. It's about modifying the utilities to be located in the right of way. Unless prevented by ledge or other physical constraints. So Andy, what are your thoughts about this?
So the utilities, at least electric and telecom utilities, want to be outside the right of way. That's where they're planned for, and easements will be conveyed to them outside the right of way. So we'd be happy to add that to the plan, stipulate that easements be provided, but utilities want to be outside the right of way.
I almost.
So Marla, are we
Andy,
okay with that
How
then?
wide an easement, just so I can write the condition appropriately, how wide an easement would that be?
Okay.
I believe where it's directly adjacent to a right of way, Green Mountain Power, and they're typically the one who the easement is conveyed to, and then the telecom utilities are
Okay, great, thank you.
subsidiary to that. It's typically 10 feet wide, directly adjacent to the right of way.
So we good to move on? Number 3, this is about screening criteria. Marla,
Sure.
it's about
and I
removing the
provided a
berm and the
little,
hedge. Marla, I need you to explain this, please.
yeah, so the
And
first.
maybe it
there's
relates
sort
to
of-
the next
this
staff
is like a
comment. I don't
multi-parter.
know,
So
but
the first question determines whether you have to go to the next question. So there's a couple little pictures here. Delilah has the first one up. This is the originally 2017 approved plan. So if you can see on this plan, and I actually just got into the meeting, so maybe I can even annotate because that would be cool. Annotate, yeah. All right, sweet. I am. So there's this berm here, and I'm Delilah because we switched computers, with some trees on it. And so if you scroll down to the next page, the applicant is proposing to remove the berm here and just keep the treatment the same as they had originally proposed over here, and are still proposing over here. And so the question then is, let me go back to the staff comments. Landscaping, fencing, land shaping, and or screening is required along property boundaries when the board determines that 2 adjacent sites are dissimilar and should be screened or buffered from each other. So the question is this site that we're looking at dissimilar from those adjacent to it? And if so, then screening is required. So I kind of go into a description of what the adjoining properties are.
right.
Excuse me, Marla, is that literally right? We must screen it if they're
It says
quote
Development Review
dissimilar?
Board will
That's not
require
discretionary?
landscaping screening, and then there's farther. Then there's like 5 standards about what that screening is, if it's required. And the final one, the 5th one, says where existing topography and or landscaping provides adequate screening, the Development Review Board may modify the planting or buffer requirements by decreasing or increasing the requirements. So it's pretty open in terms of what that screening could be if the board determines that the properties are dissimilar.
No, but
Yeah.
where's the part that's what I'm asking.
Yeah, so
Is
we'll
does
pull
the
it up
mere
right now.
fact that it's dissimilar
just before I
require
read.
screening?
So it's
Is that-
13.04C.
All right, so it's not cause and effect. It says two adjacent
you're
sites
right,
are
yep.
dissimilar and should be screened or buffered from each other.
Yes.
It doesn't say if they're dissimilar, they must be screened or buffered from each other. The determination of whether they should be screened or buffered, whether or not, even if they're dissimilar, still lies
I
in the
agree.
discretion of the board. That's the language.
Which we only have to address
And then
the
your next
screening
comment, number
if the
4,
board
Marla.
determines that the sites are dissimilar and should be screened or buffered from one another.
But don't you make the recommendation in the next one that the board approve the requested landscaping modification?
Yeah, but I also kind of make that recommendation in 3, I guess. So either way, yep.
So, board,
Well, I'm inclined to go along with the staff recommendation, but I don't read. I mean, I take some issue with the language. The fact that it's dissimilar does not.
the fact
There's nothing that requires screening or
Yeah,
buffering.
I think you're right, Frank, and I appreciate your
As
interpretation.
a matter of what the ordinance says, whether. Okay, if it's dissimilar, then we exercise it. Then the next step is we exercise our discretion. Is there something about the dissimilarity that requires screening and buffering? For example, like a glue factory next door to a residence. Okay. We come out in the same place in this instance.
So, I'm sorry, Frank, say that again, please.
I'm comfortable with the substantive recommendation of the staff. I just don't agree with some of the reasoning, that's all.
Okay.
I don't want to belabor it further.
Okay. Other people, any other thoughts? Are people comfortable with approving the landscape modifications?
So can I just get a clarification on what is being asked, because we sort of went back and forth and I'm just a little confused. So right now, there's a landscape berm along with some street plantings, street tree plantings. So we're talking about getting rid of the landscape berm and just keeping the street trees, correct? Yeah. We are getting rid of that very heavily dense cedar hedge right on Spear Street, correct? Okay, all right, I'm fine with that change. My concern was that we were leaving that cedar hedge, and I just had major issues with that potentially affecting sight lines of turning vehicles. So, yeah, no, I don't feel we need to require additional screening for a non-dissimilar use or something that's not been requested by an adjacent property owner, because of turning headlights and stuff like that, which we have done in the past.
Is there anyone on the board who is not okay with approving the landscape modifications? Okay. Hearing none, we'll move on to comment number 5, which is about rerouting the existing drain.
The applicant is okay with the 2 revisions requested by Public Works, the addition of the backflow prevention valve and noting on the plan that explicitly that it's
staff
private.
comment 5.
Okay, great. So we can move on. Any comments or? Staff comment 5 is about the existing footing drain and rerouting it.
Sorry, I commented on the Public Works comment. I think planning and zoning staff asked that the applicant demonstrate why the existing daylight location is not suitable, and it currently daylights at what would be, or what will be, the back of the homes along Halcyon Lane. And so having that footing drain daylight at that location will discharge water onto the surface behind those homes in an area that it would have to travel quite some distance overland in order to get to catch basin 3, rather than create a wet area and a potential nuisance in the backyards of 39, 40, and 41. Instead, the footing drain is proposed to be piped to the catch basin.
So are you reluctant
No,
or
so they're
not
proposing
willing
to
to
reroute
move
it.
that
Yep.
or
And
reroute
so
it?
this is a slightly
No,
new
No, you want to
standard,
reroute
or
it.
not slightly. This is a new
Okay.
standard. So this is the first instance of seeing this new standard, which is house footing drains shall only be connected to drainage facilities located in the street right of way when a suitable location to daylight the footing drain cannot be found. So presumably, if I were to take a well-educated guess, the stormwater department wanted this standard because daylighting the footing drain gives the groundwater that the footing drain has removed an opportunity to re-infiltrate into the soil rather than be whisked away to the nearest water body. But not the hill I'm going to die on. Just wanted to make sure we crossed our T's and dotted our I's.
Okay, board members, thoughts? So people can live with this. Dan, do you want to be recognized? I got a little message.
No, that's an old message.
Okay, sorry. Okay, are we ready to move on? And I think that we are done. So, are there any members of the public that would like to comment on this project? And Delilah, do you see any in the chat box that indicate people want to make comments? You do not. So no one is here to make comments. Okay. Thank you. So I would entertain a motion to close this hearing. In fact, I will actually move that we close this hearing. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, thanks. Any discussion? All in favor of closing this hearing, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Thank you all for your patience. This was an interesting issue.
Thank you.
So thank you, applicant, and we will move on.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm just going to get my document up here on my iPad. It's always a little tricky. Okay. All right. The next agenda item is item number 8. Continued final plat application SD 2125 of Green Mountain Development Group, Inc. for the next phase of a previously approved master plan for up to 458 dwelling units and up to 45,000 square feet of office space. The phase consists of 2 4-story multi-family residential buildings on lots 10 and 11 with a total of 94 dwelling units, of which 79 are proposed inclusionary units, and 2 city streets at 255 Kennedy Drive. So once again, staff has worked very hard to pull all this together in a draft decision. This does have a number of red areas for us to discuss tonight, so I think we will go ahead and welcome the applicant and see where we go with this. So who is here for the, oh, let me just first say, are there any disclosures or recusals? And I will disclose that I own a townhome in the Hillside development, but I don't believe that it will affect my decision-making unless anyone has any objection to that. So who's here for the applicant?
Tom Getz here for Green Mountain Development Group.
Hi, Tom.
Hello.
Andrew Gill here with O'Brien Brothers.
Hi, Andrew.
And Evan Meinfeld also with the Burlington.
Hi, Evan. So you've all been sworn in. This is a continuation, so I think we're good to go ahead. Before we start going through the comments, are there any comments
can I just
that
chime in, Evan? Your
you
audio
three
was
would like to make?
really dreadful.
Kind of general comments?
No, Evan's. Yes, perfect.
Mine? Oh, Evan,
How about now?
much better.
Better? Okay, sorry about that.
Yes. All right. Guys, do you have anything you'd like to say before we start diving into the comments?
I don't think so.
Oh, okay. All right, let's.
We're excited to be this close, guys.
All right, so the way Marla did this was she has numbered comments, and the red markups that are not numbered will be answered when the numbered comments are. So we will move along to the numbered comments. And the first one is, let me see here, on page 6. And this is about the inclusionary units and requiring 47 total between the two buildings and making sure that there's enough in each so that they're physically integrated. And the comment is, staff recommends the board find that the proposed building shall contain no fewer than 47 total inclusionary units, and that each building must contain at least 10 affordable units and 5 market rate units. So applicant, what are your thoughts about this?
I guess I'll jump in.
Go ahead, Andrew.
Well, I think in general understand the feedback. We had discussed, I think at the last hearing, something along similar lines related to the sort of requirements for the inclusionary housing. I had submitted a letter today that I assume that you guys haven't had the chance to thoroughly read, but I did talk about this a little bit in the letter. I think that, in large part, Summit is planning to do an affordable housing development. And so, having a condition that there be affordable housing units in the buildings is probably not problematic. The only thing that we sort of wanted to clarify was that saying that they'll have 47 inclusionary units, the terms are not interchangeable. And so I think, an inclusionary unit is required as an offset for a market rate unit. And the first building that gets built in the project can't have 47 inclusionary units in it because there are no market rate units to be offset. And so while they can be inclusionary units for future market rate development, and that's the intent, I just, would want to make sure that condition was
Andrew, these
clear.
inclusionary units would support
It just is a little bit
preliminary
murky
plat.
in our minds.
The buildings proposed for preliminary plat. So this would apply to, this final plat is applicable to the entire project area defined in the preliminary plat. Which I think is what you're saying, right? So our intention was not to say anything different than what you're saying.
Yeah, no, I think, I would probably, I don't know if it causes any confusion or not, but to me, like it would say, if it said 47 affordable units, I think that would be, easier, but yeah, 47 inclusionary units, is fine in the sense of support that being understood PUD wide across all 6 lots. The challenge, which I alluded to in the letter as well, is that the inclusionary units have some requirements that are sort of difficult to gauge this early in the project, and that sort of it becomes a little bit complicated in terms of the analysis of the bedrooms and the mean number of bedrooms and how you're making that determination prior to the market rate bedrooms being constructed that these are in compliance across all 47 units. And so I was trying to make a distinction that, they're only inclusionary when they're offsetting a market rate apartment that's built. And so, I think that that's a framework
Andrew, are
that
you
makes
saying
some
that you
of
would
the other
build the
criteria more
required
easy
inclusionary
to
units
get
in a
through.
different building? So if these are not the inclusionary units and the
No,
required
just
inclusionary
saying-
units
I'm
are
saying
not
that
in
we
another
would build-
building, how do you meet your requirement to provide inclusionary units?
These are affordable units that I
So
think
would you
what I'm
like to
saying is will
amend
become
this final plat
inclusionary
prior to
units
getting
when they're
another
offsetting
approval?
something that's built. No, so the request is that you're saying that there'll be 47 inclusionary units, and in another section of the opinion, the draft decision, there's a framework to evaluate the mean number of bedrooms for those inclusionary units. And the framework is problematic because the framework is not predicting the number of bedrooms in the 5 or 4 lots coming after this project because it doesn't know what they are. And so what I'm saying is that the challenge with saying that these are the 47 inclusionary units means that you have to prove out that they have the same mean number of bedrooms as the market rate units, which we can't prove out right now because the market rate units aren't built. And so I'm just saying that the decision needs to account for the fact that as the market rate units are built, that criteria needs to be evaluated once those bedrooms are known. I can't tell you right now if the 47 units that Tom builds will have the same number of bedrooms as the 5 buildings that remain on the site, right? And so the decision just needs to account for the ability to say over time of the units in the Summit project, these are the units, these are the number of bedrooms of those units, and those units comply with the number of bedrooms of market rate units we're proposing in this next build. That's the crux of the distinction.
I find, can you hear me, Andrew?
Yep.
Okay. And Marla too. I take the silence of the board to represent confusion to some extent. I feel the same confusion. I think what Andrew is saying is, well, he said it. You can't tell me that the inclusion, that the affordable housing units, which I'm going to call them that for a minute, have any ratio to the non-affordable housing units, the number of bedrooms in the non-affordable housing units, until the non-affordable housing units, the market rate units, are, if not built, at least locked in as far as their design is concerned. I get that. My concern, and I think maybe, although Marla will speak for herself, I think maybe the counter concern is this. So what if we don't have some measure for requiring, shall we say, something other than studio apartments to be, to overstate the matter, we would like some control over what the affordable units consist of. So given that it's difficult for you to meet this precise measure that was accepting for the moment, and it's difficult for you to meet the precise measure laid out in the draft, what measure do you propose affirmatively for allowing us to, in the end, be assured that there's a fair distribution with respect to number of bedrooms per unit size, if you like, a comparable distribution among the affordable housing units when compared to the market rate units? What is your proposed alternative? As I understand, your desired alternative is let us build, don't impose this requirement, but I think that's maybe a non-starter, and we're looking for some standard for assuring that we get a fair distribution among the affordable housing units. I hope that was not too garbled and you get what I'm getting at.
It's helpful.
Yeah, definitely. I think, there's a couple ideas. You could start with a super simplistic one, and you could probably move on to something more complicated. On a very simplistic level, you could say that the criteria would be evaluated, beginning with the third or fourth building that's constructed. That way, you're looking at a zoning permit after there's some market rate units built and saying, at that point, you either need to build more affordable units because you're out of whack with your bedrooms, or you need to adjust this project to have units in line with the affordables that you pre-built. So you could just delay reviewing it until, a mass of buildings had been constructed. That would be a sort of simplistic way. And I think, another alternative, which we were thinking through over the past few days, is that the inclusionary units that are required at each building would be measured against affordable units that were selected from the units that Summit is building. So if you think about lot 10 in isolation, it's a 47 unit building. If that's the first building that pulls a zoning permit, that building has a requirement of 7 inclusionary units. And at that point, you would say, in this building itself, these 7 affordable units have this many bedrooms, the remaining 39 units have this many bedrooms, and that ratio matches. At the next building that came online, you'd have another 7 inclusionary units required, and you would look at the requirement on that building. Between the 2 buildings, you would then need 14 of the affordable units to meet the ratio. And when we came in with the third building, say it was 100 units, you would then have a requirement for another 15. And so you'd be consistently drawing from affordable units that Tom had pre-built, qualifying those as inclusionary units at that point in time, and balancing the bedroom ratio with those units against the new ones, market rate ones being constructed.
All right, so if we had a minimum, of course, you're saying 7 and Marla's saying 10. But if we had, if you're saying building by building, you have to keep the ratio the same, then that's easy to understand. And now we're down to arguing about what the number of affordable units are in each building, which I think you didn't want to be held to. So I may be remembering that wrong.
That's the distinction that I was making between affordable and inclusionary. So Tom's buildings are going to have affordable units in them that meet all of those income restrictions. And there certainly will be more than 7. And so I don't think that there's any issue with saying that. The distinction I'm making is that the zoning regulations require 7 inclusionary units that meet the definition of inclusionary under the regulations when we propose a building of 47 units. So you can call those 47 units market rate for the time being from a zoning perspective. But at the point that we pull them in because they're rent controlled and say these are meeting our inclusionary requirement, that's what I'm talking about. Like that's the distinction. It's not an inclusionary unit if it doesn't meet this bedroom ratio. It's just an affordable housing. And if it's not required because you haven't built any market rate units, they're not even required to be inclusionary. So I 100% think that it's absurdly complicated. And I do take the silence to mean that. What we're trying to avoid, to be clear, is that Tom's first building and his second building together might have a great bedroom ratio to apply to the first market rate building. But the first building might be heavier on studio apartments than the second. And so if you're saying on a step-by-step basis, every building must comply, it doesn't give an opportunity for the PUD to ever be reviewed. It just puts you in a box out of the gate with whatever that first building is.
I am confused because I thought you were proposing to comply building by building. So I'm really.
Well, can I interject here? In the preliminary plat round.
It's really hard to understand you, Evan. I'm sorry.
Is this better at all?
A little bit.
I don't know what to do here. Hold on, I'll take one thing.
This may be clear, but quiet.
No, sorry.
I can't tell you how it warms my heart to see other people's fumbling with their equipment.
Can I interject? But I don't want to step on Evan's toes
Yes,
at all.
I was just going to turn to you while Evan tries to figure it out.
The board has been in this situation where the applicant proposes to deal with the deficiency.
About now.
Much better.
The board's been in the situation.
Now I can't hear you though.
The board's been in the situation where the applicant proposes to deal with the deficiency
You can't have it all,
Evan. Before, right?
All right. Can you guys hear me?
Wait a
Did
minute.
someone say something? Yeah,
Hold on. Marla, please, for 1 second. Evan, can you hear us? I don't think he can hear us.
Oh gosh.
And I want to hear what Marla has to say.
Yeah, go ahead, Marla. I'll text Evan and let him know.
I can hear you guys now if you can hear me.
Okay. Can we thank you, Evan. Can we let
The
Marla
concern
speak
is
first?
if you don't, if you say,
Thanks.
well, we'll.
Go ahead, Marla.
Maybe these first buildings on lots 10 and 11 consist of, 30 studios, 10 one bedrooms, and 7 2 bedrooms, for example. And then Andrew says, well, I want to build a building that's all 2 bedrooms, but we'll true up by the time. But my building only contains, 47 units, and there's 7 2 bedrooms in this building. So we're good, right? That's what he's explaining, because there's 7 2 bedrooms and 47 units would require 7 inclusionary units, and there's 7 inclusionary units. Great. Next building comes along and Andrew says, I want to build some more 2 bedrooms. And the board says, well, you've only got studios. If you build anything bigger than studios, then you can't have your project. And while we may say it's too bad, we know from past experience that the city and the board is also interested in having housing across the appropriate range of sizes built. And so it's very difficult for the board to completely deny an application when the applicant has painted themselves into a corner.
And we've run into this before.
I think that I'm not I've struggled really hard to convey the problem. And I think that the letter that we sent today, in 3 or 4 paragraphs, I thought was conveying the problem. maybe Marla and I are
The
talking
problem or
around-
the solution?
both.
Okay.
Maybe we're talking around each other a little bit. The way that I read the draft decision was that you were saying when Tom comes in for his first building, you're going to say that building has 47 units. Let's, for like ease of numbers, say that, there's 39, I don't know, it's not an easy number, 39 affordable housing units, and there's 8 market rate housing units. When you determine the bedroom ratio, in order to meet this inclusionary requirement, what is the math that you're doing, right? So if the math that you're doing is that you're saying all 39 affordable units, let's figure out how many bedrooms they have and divide it by 39. And then the 8 market rate units, let's figure out how many bedrooms they have and divide it by 8. Those are your bedroom ratios. What I'm saying is that's an unfair test because there's 39 affordable units when only 7 inclusionary units are required. And so you're lopsiding the test and coming up with ratios that aren't representative of what the future market rate number of bedrooms might be. And it's just, if Marla's saying that you would look at in the 47 unit building, you have 7 inclusionary units required. So pick 7 of the affordable units and call those your inclusionary and run the ratio on 7 units. And then on the next building, now you have 14 units
and I'm
required,
saying
run
that's
it
a
on
problematic
14
solution.
units. That's exactly what I'm saying would work perfectly
I'm
fine.
understanding you and
Yeah.
restating what you're saying and then concluding that it's problematic because you're painting yourself into a corner. But I'd like to go back to something you said a minute ago, that it's an unfair test. Fair or not fair, the regulations are clear. The average, parentheses, mean number of bedrooms in the inclusionary units shall be no fewer than the average number of bedrooms in the market rate units.
Right, but the market rate units aren't built and you don't know how many bedrooms are in.
Well,
And the inclusionary units are built because they're being built first. This is the crux of the problem. How do you know how many bedrooms are in the market rate units in the other 4 or 5 buildings that are not built at the time the first zoning permit for Tom's building is submitted? That's the problem. So we need a solution. And when we've run the math on this, we're talking about being within, if this were to cause a problem for us, based on, our current best estimate as to how many bedrooms Tom is thinking he's going to have in his buildings and how many bedrooms O'Brien Brothers is thinking we're going to have in ours, we're off by like 1 bedroom across 375 units. So we're not wildly divergent here, but we risk our zoning permits being, denied over 1 unit that, at the point in the process that we're in proposing for final plat, it's really problematic to redesign a building to get a 2-bedroom if you have a 1-bedroom, right? But that isn't even a problem when you look at all 4 of the buildings together. It's only a problem when you look at how the potential conflicts in the phasing of the 4 buildings. When you just look at all 4 buildings that we have planned, our best guess of what will happen now, we comply. But when you look at them individually, one by one over time, it can cause an issue.
And I just want to reiterate, it's a challenge because we're leading with the affordable units.
Right.
So we're sort of being penalized for the
Affordable
fact that we're
Housing
delivering
Committee was
affordable
very
housing units
clear
before they're required.
that they were okay with this
I get
standard
that, yeah.
in lieu of the standard that required the units be the same size as the market rate units. This is the standard that replaced that, making them the same size standard. And so they made it as crystal clear as possible.
I don't want to interject myself too much into this because this is more Andrew and Evans, but I will just make the short comment that I did think that the solution that was come up at preliminary plat was somewhat elegant. That was, you have the first 4 buildings, by the time that 4th one is done, you have to demonstrate that you've met your inclusionary requirements or you don't get the 5th building. And so that was already in the preliminary plat. And if you just didn't add any of this new language, that would exist. They would then be stuck not being able to build their 5th building. And this, I'm admittedly confused by some of it too, would go away if you just stuck with that sort of simple, elegant approach from the preliminary plat. But if others don't like that, I'll sort of back out, because our plan is to build our affordable units and get them online as fast as we can.
Well, the problem, it may sound elegant, but the problem is, so you can't build a 5th building, but in the meantime, there are 4 buildings that exist, don't comply with the requirement of the regulations.
Yeah, I mean, that was the risk that preliminary plat was, the approval was willing to take back then. I don't know, I wasn't part of that. That it seemed like knowing the developer and knowing the commitment to affordable housing, I guess, felt like it was a worthwhile compromise and back then. So if the board still feels that way, I think it's a reasonable way to say that was the preliminary plat decision. Let's stick with that, and made sense then, and we can abide by that.
And just to restate the reason why that agreement or kind of compromise came up with was because of the vagaries of the affordable housing financing process. And so the original reason for it was that we weren't sure that the affordable housing units were going to be able to come online. So it was, or we couldn't really predict as to when they were going to come online. So in fact, we're actually reversing this. And so the city's getting the affordable housing units. It doesn't clear up the issue that I think Frank is pointing to, but I think kind of getting to what Andrew had said, the likely risk here in terms of being out of whack is pretty minimal, and it's something that can be made up fairly easily on that 5th building.
And so, Evan, I have to admit, I'm hanging on to understanding this by a thread, but is there any way to put the onus on O'Brien to make this true up when you build the 5th building?
Yeah, that's
or the 6th building, I should say.
No, we're saying the 5th building, if this is out of whack, out of balance, the 5th building has to perfect it. It has to be within the balance.
But are you required to build the 5th building? What if you say, the market's not so hot, I think we won't build it?
Well, no, we're not required to do it, but I mean, you could also make the argument. Well, right, Frank, but you could also make the argument that the market is really challenging to build a market rate building right now. And so all you may end up with is a bunch of affordable housing units. So
but Frank,
there's your challenge.
If we never build the 5th building and that building is 100 units, then we'll just have such an excess of inclusionary units pre-built that it would just be, this is the point that I was trying to make, is that the inclusionary unit having the same number of bedrooms, any unit can be affordable. We could build 47 studio apartments that qualify as affordable housing. What makes them meet the requirements, inclusionary housing is required when you build market rate housing. So if we build 10 units of market rate housing, we're required to have 1.5 inclusionary units. If we never build that 100 units, and we're counting the full 15% of the maximum density of the PUD and using that in calculating this inclusionary ratio, the whole thing's off anyway.
Let's assume for a moment that the problem is this. At least the simple problem is that what do you need to do to comply with the regulation? The regulation may be ill-conceived, may be a bad idea. But until we have a solution that is consistent with the regulation, with more than a straight face, and then without a wink, wink, then we got a problem, no matter how bad the regulation is written. You get my drift here with?
I think that we have a solution. And the solution is that every zoning permit for each building will make a distinction, will qualify the inclusionary housing that's been pre-built as meeting the test of the bedroom mean average. So Tom builds the first building, it's 47 units. There are 39 affordable units in that building. That 47 unit building requires 7 inclusionary units. Tom can pick any 7 units he wants to be the inclusionary units to calculate that ratio. And the other 39 units in the building or whatever it is are market rate until they're qualified as inclusionary by the next building. The next building is 47 units. It again requires 7 inclusionary units. Now we pick another 7 of the affordable units, qualify them as inclusionary, and then say of the so many units that are proposed, 15% of those must be inclusionary. Here are the 15 inclusionary units. Here's the number of bedrooms balanced against the other units, which are now just still market rate, and it meets the test. Third building comes online, another 10 units are required. We take another 10 of the affordable units, we qualify them as inclusionary. They meet the test of the ratio across the full number of units now built. We're still in compliance with the bedroom ratio, and we continue that through the 6th building.
Okay.
Every time we build a market rate building, we access more of the pre-built inclusionary units and qualify them and move on.
Which means you can build a couple of buildings with no inclusionary units, right? With no affordable units.
No, because you can have a requirement that says that the first building, Tom's project, the requirement to have 47 affordable units, put it in.
Well,
affordable, not inclusionary.
How about the second, third? How about the second, third, and fourth buildings? If you're drawing, in other words, if you're using your first building as a stockpile from which to
which
meet
is allowed, having a stockpile of all the
bedroom
inclusionary.
mumbo jumbo, right?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
That's
So
the front loading, isn't it, that Evan referred to? Yeah.
All right. So, all right, I'm starting to slowly, painfully slowly, get the drift of what Andrew was saying. Marla,
I think we'll have
what's
to think
wrong?
about it some more. I kind of get what he's saying, but it has this feel, as we were talking about before, it has this feel of, as Delilah said, a shell game. And, we want to make sure that the regulations are being met both in letter and in spirit. And I guess we would have to spend some time thinking about it and make sure that there's not any deficiencies.
So, given that, Marla, are you saying
I
that
guess-
we cannot close this tonight? That we'd have to continue it?
Sort of like a dare, but
And I know we have
if the
other
applicant
issues to
feels like their
discuss.
proposal is sound, then, and they trust that the board can
Well, we could,
get to yes on it, then I don't think we need any more information.
Okay.
we can always, if we, after banging our wooden heads together for a while longer on this formula.
That does take longer than just continuing and like opening and saying, all right, we're done, we're all set.
But it,
so if you think you might need more information, I would recommend keeping it open, with the intention of just saying, we're all set, thanks, good night.
I would just like to weigh in and express some concern on that, because we are confident that this does balance out. And, I think, with a little bit more kind of closely reading of what we're proposing, I think it does make sense, and it does meet both the letter and the intent of the regulation. We just happen to be providing the units up front. And I think the concern really, and, I'll rely on Tom on this, but there is a timing concern with the financing for the affordable and inclusionary units. So there is a sense of urgency here.
Right.
Tom, do you want to weigh in on that?
yeah.
We certainly have a sense of urgency. I mean, we've submitted 3 housing applications. We have about 6 funding resources we need, and we certainly rely on getting permitted to get those resources. I think that we talk through that. I think my only question is everybody, is everybody feel that the answer that was to this question that was already in the preliminary plat, which is they just have to meet it by the 4th building, that needs to get scrapped for some reason? Because that seems to me like
The preliminary
this was already
plat-
decided, and now Andrew's come up with a
the
new
preliminary
answer
plat
to
finding
supersede
didn't
that.
have
That's the
same
elegant,
sort of
the
phasing.
elegant one?
Yeah, yeah.
They were going to be all submitted. All of the final plats were going to be submitted together. So though the building was going to be constructed in a certain order, I think that we were going to know certainly before the final plat was concluded where it was going to be. Andrew's nodding.
Yeah, well, I thought maybe that I could summarize the problem. I think that we trust that you guys can come up with a solution. I think we've made the point of what the issue is. I would say that we would trust the board to make, the permit work. I guess that what I just would leave this subject with would be like the example of what we think the problem is. Tom's group, Summit, and our group, O'Brien Brothers, are both applied for final plat, and we're both racing to construction for our projects in this site. So we've applied final plat for lot 13 and 15 for a project that's going to be in front of you, and I hope very soon, for market rate housing apartments on our 2 lots. Tom has applied for his affordable housing on his 2 lots. And what I would hate to see have happen, all 4 of our projects, all 4 lots, when looked at together, meet this requirement, the inclusionary requirement for the mean number of bedrooms. So we've done the analysis and they meet it. But if one of Tom's buildings comes to market first before ours and the other one doesn't, there's a chance that we could be off by 1 bedroom or 2 bedrooms, and it could tank our ability to get our zoning permit. So you could end up in a situation where if we go first, we're fine because Tom meets our project with his. But if he gets to the starting line first with a zoning permit and you review it the way that you drafted the decision, we could potentially not be able to get our zoning permit because we wouldn't meet the requirement, even though we have a final plat for our units. So there's just this sort of funneling where all 4 buildings work together fine, but depending on who gets to the starting line first and the way that the condition was worded, we have that problem. So that's the problem we're trying to solve, and what we're trying to avoid. And I think, the solution we just talked about is a great way of doing it. If you guys can come up with an alternative way, that would be, fine as well.
I guess I have another question that occurs to me about the math, so to speak. If you're going to stockpile your units in Tom's first building, basically, right? 39 affordable units, aren't you hemming in what you can do with the later market rate units? Because you have to make you're sort of predetermining what the mix needs to be in the later market rate units. You're making decisions about the number of bedrooms in the affordable units. And therefore, limiting your discretion in the later units, right?
Tom's 2 buildings have different unit mixes. They have different distinctions. So while all the floor plans are the same, one building might have 10 affordable studios and another building might have 2 affordable studios, right? His floor plans are the same, but the units designated as affordable that would qualify for inclusionary are different. So depending on which of his buildings comes online first, the balance of bedrooms could be off from our project. But when you view both of his buildings together with our project, the bedroom balances out and it all works. So that's the problem with looking at it building by building, zoning permit by zoning permit, is that Tom's 2 buildings don't have the same market rate and affordable units. They're the same units. They are each 47 units and they're each whatever, but in this building, more studios are affordable than in this building. And I don't know why that is. That has to do with the financing that they're applying for, but that's the challenge, right? So depending which one comes online first, the ratio could be off. And you could say that that's the challenge, I guess. But when you look at them together, the ratio is on.
Well,
And
if are they being permitted together? I mean, excuse me, are they being approved together? Are they being proposed as part of the same development, or are they each separate phases?
They're separately financed. We're hoping that the financing gets approved simultaneously, but it's separate applications under separate programs.
What a headache.
You mean the two buildings that you're proposing to build, Tom, are different funding sources?
Correct.
Wow.
There's not enough money. Yeah, we had to spread it out. There's not enough money to do them all as one, so we had to do them as two.
but we're also, I mean, in his combination of buildings, Tom's proposing, I think the current is 70 affordable housing units, right? And our
71.
required inclusion area is only 47. And so, we're significantly overbuilding the number, which means that if we're only drawing on 47 of 70 units, the likelihood of being able to make this bedroom mix work cumulatively is fairly easy, because if Tom builds 23 studios, we can just not even count them, right? Because we only need 47. So when you look at his project as a whole, it all works really easily. It's just this looking at a singular building and then applying that ratio potentially to our building second that causes a problem.
Okay. All right, Marla.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Sorry, I just wanted to confirm, because just to go back to the initial point, I don't think we'll need additional information to come to a conclusion in deliberation. But I did just want to confirm kind of to the concern that staff noted of like a potential shell game kind of situation. So what I wanted to confirm is Andrew, your suggestion to kind of qualify the actual inclusionary units kind of 7 at a time as the buildings come online, right?
Yeah, my proposal is to qualify the number that would be required as 15% of the market rate proposed.
Yeah.
Whatever the number is.
Yeah, with that. So what I wanted to confirm is that, am I correct in understanding that like once you qualified a certain number of units, the example you were using was like 7 in the first building, and then the second building comes online and you need 7 qualified inclusionary units, you would still be stuck with that first 7 you qualified. You want to just we can pick a new 14 to make it work, to make the bedrooms work. You would just like once you qualify a set of units, those would be qualified, and then you're adding to that. You're not picking and choosing from the new updated pool. Is that correct?
I think so. I haven't thought about it, but I think that would be right.
Okay, because I think that maybe would help, but I don't know if that addresses any concerns.
Frank, were you going to say something?
No, I think it's covered, I think.
Okay.
All right. I'm going to restate what I thought was being said, but I think I get it. You get it, Andrew? You don't get to throw the first 7 back in the pot and pick a different 7 in order to
I think that makes perfect sense. Yeah.
Huh?
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. I don't think we need to do that. We would pick 7 that were closely in line with the ratio we needed, and we would do that all the way through.
Okay, I just wanted to confirm that component. Great.
Okay, can we move on?
Sorry, guys.
I hope there's
I feel like that really was a tough one. The rest are so good though. Everything else
Okay.
is just pretty
All right,
straightforward.
let's move on to number 2. And this is asking for a modification of the landscaping to address the site distance issues.
Yeah, we submitted an updated landscaping plan. It might have gotten lost in the mix. I referenced it again today. We did provide for plants that were 36 inches or less in those locations. We're happy to change it again to make them all 18 or less. It could be a condition of the zoning permit, whatever you guys want for those plants.
Yeah, I'm going to say what I say a lot.
Marla,
If I
does
take
that do it?
Andrew's word that what he says is correct and reflected on the plans, yes.
Okay, good, thanks. All right, the next page, number 3. This is improvements to the pocket park. Andrew and Evan, what are you, and Jim, Tom, I'm sorry. What are your thoughts about this?
Yep, that's a fine condition. If you want to have the requirement that there be semicircle seating and a covered table, we're happy to add that to the pocket park if the board
All right.
wants to do that.
Easy peasy. Number 4, this is about the lighting plan. We need more details about the lighting. And
I submitted a new lighting plan today with big red text on it that said the street fixtures are 14 feet tall. We had also submitted, and I think the files might have been labeled improperly, so there was some confusion, but we did submit specs for the poles and light heads. I think they said parking lot poles on the file name, so there might have been a little confusion there, but we can provide the spec sheets if
So
that's
yeah, we do
needed,
need
but
to
we did
know what
update
you're
the plan to confirm
proposing
all
for
the
the
lights
street,
are 14
because
feet
they
tall.
need to be compatible
Okay.
with the city standards for the street. So
Yep, we submitted the light
Yes, that is-
fixtures.
that
They're
is
the
our standard.
Metroscape
I'm
LED
just
fixture that the
gonna-
city prefers.
because
Um,
your naming is wrong, I guess is what you're saying. I'm just gonna write the condition that says the street lighting shall be Metroscape according to city standards and shall be 14 feet tall. Is that okay with you?
Perfect. Yep.
Good. Okay. Moving on to number 5. So this is about the ramps, and it's about whether the ramps should be removed. And if my memory serves,
So they were
the
never on
thinking
the
is that
plans.
the
they were
ramps
in the
are not a good
recommendations of
idea
the
and
traffic
do away with
consultant.
them. Is that correct,
The
Marla?
applicant's traffic consultant. And so the staff's recommendation originally was to keep them. So Lila, if you want to pull up page 30, I think might be a good one. And so, cool. I'm going to draw on, that's not page 30, that's 31.
I am stepping up for
So
a
the
minute.
idea
Dan,
was
if
that
you
there were
could
gonna be
take the helm.
ramps, when the project kind of goes from a rec path in this location to a regular sidewalk in this location, there would be sort of a ramp from, oh, come on, down this way to get people out into the road, and same deal down this way to get bikes out into the road. So staff reviewed that more closely, and we ultimately think that it would do more harm than good to include them. So I think that we are walking back our previous recommendation to include them in the same way the applicant walked back their recommendation to include them.
So we're all agreed, right?
Sure are.
All right,
Okay.
next comment.
Hang on. We're on 6,
Can you
which is on
scroll back to that?
page-
Thanks.
Wait for it. 20.
I'm back.
Page top of page 20. We're on
All right,
6.
I'll give you back
Just
the
have to scroll
wheels.
up a bit.
We on 7?
So this was about
6, okay.
maintenance of landscaping in the right of way. So I watched the video and I listened to everything everybody said, and it sounds like the board
Right.
didn't like the idea of the applicant contributing to the city's landscaping budget to have the city maintain this landscaping, which was the recommendation of the deputy city manager and the director of public works, by the way. So our alternative proposal is that the applicant can maintain it on their own. However, they would be required to record a memorandum of understanding that said if the landscaping was not maintained, the city had the right to remove it. And the reason we're proposing this is because we have been a number of times in the past in this situation where somebody says they're going to do something and then they stop doing it, and then the people who live there say, City Council, why does our landscaping look like crap? Why don't you make our DPW maintain it? And then, we're on the hook for paying for something we never intended to pay for in the first place. So in order to reduce the taxpayer burden, we would like a memorandum of understanding saying that the applicant will maintain it, and if they don't, we can remove it.
Yeah, that's perfectly fine if you guys want to prepare it. But we just wanted to make one distinction. I think I might have mentioned it in the letter, but the, I think this says removed at the applicant's cost, which is fine for the memorandum to say that. We just would, any time that's a remedy, there's typically an allowance for the person to cure the deficiency. So, if we don't repair it or remove it ourselves within 30 days, the city can do it and back charge us or whatever. Yep, that's fine.
I have a quick question on that, Madam Chair. What's to prevent any applicant from, is it only because of the right of way issue? Just because I can see like they'd plan it and then walk away. And I guess as long as it does, I'll put it this way, does this
No.
planting within the right of way help meet their landscaping budget? Okay, all right, never mind then.
Okay, moving on to number 7. I'm not sure I understand this. On January 4th, the board determined they would allow credit for the incremental cost over standard features. The applicant indicated they would provide this information, but that has not been done. So have you now provided that information?
We provided today,
Okay.
we provided it on the 24th, but I think that it was a little bit confusing, maybe the spreadsheet, but we sent a new spreadsheet in today that we updated to make more clear what the reductions were based on, base cost of paving or whatever versus concrete paving.
Okay.
Or a base cost of concrete versus colored concrete, that kind of thing.
Okay.
So we did provide updated estimates that reduced the dollar amount by the base cost.
Okay, thanks. Number 8, this is about should we allow credit for the Silva cells? My sense is we should because they contribute to healthier trees, but entertain other thoughts from board members.
But I'm okay with allowing the cost to be applied.
Is anyone not? I'm sorry, Dan?
Likewise, I agree.
Okay, is anyone not in favor of this?
I think that was the last
great.
red comment. But you're welcome to discuss
Moving
anything else.
on. I think that's it. And there's a couple of red items in your conclusions, but they relate to things we've discussed tonight. So I guess the question to the board is, do folks believe that we have enough information to close this hearing and deliberate?
Are there any members of the public who want to comment?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, well, yeah, okay, let's take that first. Thanks, Dan. Are there any members of the public who want to comment? Or are there any online, Delilah? No, okay. So back to the question, do you think that we have enough information that we can deliberate and make a decision?
I do. I think that we obviously have a few issues that we're going to have to spend some time discussing. But I think that we have all the information we're going to get. And it's up to us to craft the conditions based on the regulations and the testimony we've gotten.
Okay.
And by us, I mean staff.
Could I ask the applicants one more question?
Sure, Frank, go ahead.
Yeah.
Can't hear you. Can't hear you.
Yeah, let me move again. Is this better?
Yes, it's
Can you hear
also giving you your exercise for the day.
What do you, if you don't mind, what are your funding? What's the mix of funding? Are the tax credits involved, VHCB, Vermont Housing Finance Agency? You raised the issue of the uncertainty of the funding. What's the mix?
Yep.
I
so
don't
there's-
know that you have to answer the question. I'm just very curious.
Happy to answer it. Yeah, so we've got a mix of 9% tax credits, 4% tax credits, CDBG, Community Development Block Grant application, federal ARPA funding, the one-time money that VHCB is in charge of giving out, Efficiency Vermont rebates, a pretty significant deferred development fee, and then permanent amortizing debt. That's sort of the capital stack between the two buildings. Each building is a little bit different. Those are all the sources though, I think. No, Housing Investment Fund through VHFA and Vermont state tax credits through VHFA. That might be all of them.
Practically free.
Yeah.
if you get it all.
Yeah, about $10 million in permanent amortizing debt, or $9 million in permanent amortizing debt. So there's some debt on it, but yeah, it's
Okay.
a lot of applications.
Right.
Thank you
for satisfying that.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. All right. Anything else before we?
Oh yeah. Well, let me back up. I'm sorry, Dawn.
Okay, go ahead.
Do you have the 9% tax credits are competitive and hard to get? Do you actually have some committed, or is that the issue?
That's one of the issues. That application is due next month for decisions in April or May decision. So that's one of the ones, and one of the scoring criteria on the 9% application is readiness to proceed, which all local permits in hand gets you extra points on the 9% application, which is highly competitive. Every point counts.
Okay, so now I understand your hesitancy. The board knows that that's very much an up in the air source of financing, because that's tough money to get.
Yeah, given out once a year. So if we miss this round, we got to reapply in 12 months. Yeah.
Okay, any other questions from the board? Would someone like to make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
Thanks, Frank. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Thanks, Dan. Any discussion before we take a vote? Okay, all those in favor of closing the hearing signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, great. Well, thank you for your patience, Tom and Evan and Andrew. This was a complicated discussion, but you hung in there with us, so.
Well, we appreciate your patience as well.
Yeah, thank you all.
Get it all around.
All right.
We recognize that we continue to come before you with complicated projects and questions.
And we're not done yet, so we'll see.
No, I know.
We'll see you in a couple of
again
weeks.
and again.
Okay, all right,
you
good
all.
night, guys.
And we appreciate staff's efforts as
All
well.
right, good night.
Thank you.
Okay, board, we have some minutes to approve. The minutes of the December 21st meeting,
There should have been 2 sets in there.
which I think were the only minutes we had, weren't they, Marla?
I
Well,
think
I
that
might
the-
have missed
is it
them,
more
but I only
convenient if
saw the
I
21st.
break them out. Oh, did the other ones not make it? No, they're both in there. Yeah, page 10 starts the 4th. Is it more convenient if I break them out into 2 separate pieces on the
Okay,
website so that you see them both? No, Mark's shaking his head no.
Yeah, just scroll through it.
I just somehow
the
missed
December
the second one.
21st and
Are there
the January
2 or
4th, which
3,
I
man?
didn't even read because I wasn't there.
Okay, so should we take them together, board, or separately?
Let me do them separately just because I wasn't at the January 4th.
Okay, All right, and I haven't read that one, so, okay, would someone
I'll
like
make a
to?
motion to approve the minutes of December 21st.
Thank you. Do I hear a second?
Can I
I'll
just
second
add, I have a question about that one.
Yes, go ahead.
So it says that I was recused from item number 7. It doesn't say that I rejoined the board, but I was also
I can
recused
add it,
from
that's
item
great.
number 8. So is that just assumed, or does that need to get added in there?
Does
Okay.
it change the meaning?
Marla, do you want
Nah.
typos or just substantive? No. Okay.
I mean, you can find it. and
Okay.
That's fine.
Darn, I thought I found something.
Wait,
No.
wait,
no.
we only, Dan
All
moved
right,
to approve and that's as
January
far as we got.
4th. Would someone like to?
Wait, do we pass the motion?
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. All in favor of approving the minutes of December 21st, signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Opposed? No? Okay. January 4th. I did not read these, so does anyone have anything to offer? And would someone make a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion that we approve the minutes of January 4th.
I will second
Second.
that, but I won't vote on it because I haven't read them.
I have a question. I wasn't at,
Frank, you gotta
This
come
meeting.
over.
but
Frank, we can't hear you.
I wasn't, yeah, right, okay.
Yes,
I wasn't at this meeting, but I watched it. Do I vote on the minutes? I've never
So-
done that.
yes.
Marla, correct me if I'm wrong,
That's
but
correct.
when it comes to minutes, anyone can vote on them. They don't have to have attended the meeting. So it's not like you have
You
to
don't-
abstain just because you didn't, attend the meeting.
Okay.
Okay,
All
so
right.
Mark moved to approve and Dawn seconded.
Did we have a motion? Okay, okay, all right. All in favor of approving the minutes from January 4th, signify by saying aye.
Dawn, did you
Aye.
abstain or did you
Aye.
vote aye?
Opposed? No. Motion is carried.
Great.
I'm gonna abstain.
I
'cause I
have an
wasn't-
item for other
I
business.
haven't read them.
So we haven't had a clerk in a
Okay.
bit. I was kind of waiting till everybody got
Sure.
their feet under them, and I've decided your feet are adequately under you. So we should elect a clerk. It's very easy. You have to sign things when Dawn and Dan aren't available.
Who would like to be
And then I
clerk?
guess if Dawn and Dan were not at the meeting, you would be responsible for selecting who was chair, but you would not be responsible for being chair unless you so chose. I think Frank's laughing.
That's like a lot of responsibility.
The other thing
I
that
was
clerks
clerk
do
once, and it was an
technically
easy
is
job.
all appeals are addressed to the clerk, but really it comes to my office and you never see it.
Okay, so who is willing to be clerk?
Thank you, Mark.
I'll be clerk.
Okay, Mark, thank you.
I'll throw my hat in the ring really enthusiastically.
Yeah, okay, good, good.
Wait a minute, don't we have to vote on it?
Yes.
I don't know that
yes.
that
And there
part's
has
true.
to be at least 2 other applicants for the position.
No. No. All right, all in favor of Mark being clerk, say aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Don't oppose it because you'll end up being clerk.
And if
By
anyone wants
acclamation,
it,
all right.
and if anyone wants it in the meantime, I'm happy to abdicate my throne.
Unless you
All right, are we
no, but if
ready
you'd like
call
to
it a night?
issue on logic,
Yeah,
they
we're
would
not
be
going to
thrilled.
deliberate on O'Brien,
So
right?
we can
talked about
conclude
it previously.
the public portion of the meeting. I think we can lock the meeting. Travis,
Oh.
do you know how to do that?
I can stop recording, right? I can stop.
We can stop recording, and then Delilah can lock the meeting, and then we can ask. All right, so the meeting's concluded, so we can lock the meeting now.
I have locked the meeting.
Great. Not public. Sue left, and